If I had my way, everything would be so nice. This world would be like Paris. No, it would be a paradise. No one would ever have to say, I'm gonna get my wish someday. All one would have to do is say, this is my order, if you may.
Welcome to another episode of the School Without Walls. I'm the host, Dr. Anthony O. Hobbs. We are pre-recorded. Today is January 1, January 14th, 2016, right? January 14th, 2016. And our purpose as the School Without Walls has a purpose, and that is to primarily work to elevate, educate, and improve the African American community. The time that the program is shown is daily from 6 a.m. to about 6:30 and 4 p.m. to about 4:30. We are recording for the Black History program of February 2016. We want to keep in mind that prior to the 1930s, very little was said about African Americans in history. There was a scholar named Dr. Carter G. Woodson, and he's the author of a book called The Miseducation of the Negro. And of course, Negro is a term, young people, that was used for African Americans a few decades ago. Every person that has interest in the African American should read The Miseducation of the Negro. It will cause you to better understand me, and you will better understand why I'm doing what I'm doing, because throughout generations, many of us have missed the appropriate education. And Dr. Carter G. Woodson in the 1930s brought this out. Also, Dr. Carter G. Woodson started a movement called, it was Black History Week. It was 1 week that the whole nation put emphasis on the need for blacks to learn their history, need for all Americans to learn black history. And we've only progressed to a month. We've made 3 weeks since that time. To me, that is not enough progress. So our theme has been in the past year, Black History After February. Another year slipped in on us, and I don't see any reason to change that theme. Black History After February. We're hoping that black leaders will really take seriously what I'm saying, and especially the preachers. The preachers are the ones who have more influence than any other black leaders today. And we're encouraging you to find persons in your congregation that has an interest in history or an interest in learning history and learning how to teach history, and do so as other ethnic groups do. They don't depend on the public school for their basic education. Only the descendants of slaves depend directly on somebody else to educate their children. Your children's education should first start at home, and your family, your race is your home, and then it spreads abroad. So this is part of my mission. Now, how many minutes do I have in this quarter? We have 4 minutes here in this quarter. So what I'm going to do is also talk to you about the need to understand the methods of teaching black history. Many well-meant African Americans are so happy to talk about anything that blacks have achieved that's in the past. That's better than nothing. But if you're going to set up a curriculum, and that's what you should have in mind, preachers, having a curriculum in your school, not just spots in black history in February. You should have an ongoing program, and you start with the origin like everybody else does. For example, we study U.S. history, and that's primarily European history. They do not start the history class with USA. They start with someplace in Europe. If you're talking about the history of French in America, they go back to France. If you're talking about the history of English-speaking people in America, they go back to England. And they have a book called World History. And the world history includes history of Europeans primarily. And so we must do that. We must learn to go back to Africa and come forward. I'm going to recite some literature that will indicate that not only did the Africans come from Africa, but all people, according to science today, originated in Africa. And the title of this work is Our Mother. We should, all people, think in terms of Africa as being our mother. So it says the African origins of humanity and civilization. We should refer to Africa as mother. Mother is the best metaphor for describing Africa in relation to world history. When tracing our African roots, we arrive at the inescapable conclusion. Out of Africa came all entries into the world. She is the mother of all that from which or in which or on which continent the human race, human civilization, and the foundation of religions were conceived and delivered into the world. So we have a lot of contributions that have been made by Africans. And of course, the reason that's so important, years past, in order to justify the enslavement of the descendants of these people, the people in power declared that they had never contributed to civilization. That's where we're going with this. Mother Africa is the term used to describe Africa as the womb from which all else concerning humanity developed. From Africa has been identified as the native soil of the original people. And of course, the original people would be classified according to our classification as black. But from that came all other people. The term Africa itself is believed to have come from Rome. The Greeks have supplied us with the term Ethiopia, which literally means the land of burnt faces or the land of the blacks. That's what Ethiopia meant. And Ethiopia once was much larger than this nation they have today. The term seems to have only been applied, the term was not only applied to the people on the continent of Africa, but also those black people outside of Africa, such as Western Asia in ancient time. The Greek scholar Herodotus and Homer each identified the people of Egypt, Arabia, Palestine, what is now India, as Ethiopians, and the term meant burnt face, dark, or black people. We're going to stop on that for the break, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.
It takes less than 1 minute to find out if you may have prediabetes. You can do it here. But you probably won't. You're busy. Kids, work, show coming back in 48 seconds. So let's do this now. Hold up one finger if you're a man, women, 0. 3 more fingers if you're over 60, 2 over 50, 1 over 40. If you're not sure, keep in mind you're sitting on a couch right now, so 1 more finger if you're not very active. 1 finger if yes, 0 if no. 1 yes, 0 no. Next, find the body type that looks most like you and hold up that many fingers while I look around awkwardly. And that's it. If you're holding up 5 fingers or more, you probably have prediabetes. Sorry to be so blunt, but hey, you're busy. Just go to the site.
Those of you who've just joined us, I'm Dr. Anthony Hobbs, host of this educational program called The School Without Walls. We are pre-recording for our Black History Month of February, and what I'm doing is trying to set the foundation for the series that will come after me. And in this, I'm stressing to the general public, especially the African American community, how to properly teach the history of Africans. You go back to Africa and come forward, but in this, what I was just saying prior to the break is that all people, according to science, came out of Africa, and To be more specific, it was about 40,000 years ago. Prior to 40,000 years ago, it is believed that Africa was a solid block of land. All people on earth today live within that area. And then after the ice ages and so forth start breaking off land, we got people captured and trapped out in other parts, but they all came from the same part of the world. That's a whole lesson within itself. I believe I was mentioning that Herodotus was a great European Greek scholar, historian, and Homer not only said that the people who was in what is now the continent of Africa, which is drawn by Europeans, were black, but people in what is now India, Asia, were also the same people. Now, once we understand that, then we better understand culture. If you see the Asiatic Indians, the people that call themselves Indians, according to history, 1200 BC, all of the people in India look just like the folks do in Ethiopia, Africa, etc. But after 1200 before Christ, BC, the Aryans, which had isolated themselves in the northern part of Asia, which now are classified as white people, came down and started an invasion and fighting and interbreeding with that group of dark people. And that's we understand that why the Indians have dark skin, brown skin, tan skin. It's a mixture. They are people of color. Now, let us conclude about Mother Africa with a poem that was written by me. This is written by Dr. Anthony O. Hobbs. It's alluding to what I've just said. I have a list of poems that you might be interested in. This is all God is not prejudiced, but a projectionist. It's referring to what I've just said about all people came out of Africa and so forth and so on. God is not prejudiced, so when he created man, he did not make individuals black, white, yellow, red, and tan. The Almighty, in the creating, simply created all races in one act by cleverly placing all races in the body of the first man, Adam, who was black. What does one have to do to prove this as a fact? Just trace the evolution of all ethnic groups from present back. Examine the group that's called white, the necessary pigmentation to produce the other colors it would like. Examine the yellow, the red, and the tan all the way back. Still, you do not have sufficient melanin, which means color, to cause a group called black. No, God is not prejudiced, but a projectionist. So when he created the first man, in his body all other races were in his plan. As scientists have found, they all evolved from the African. The first rulers governed more than Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan. History showed that they populated and explored many other lands. Southern Asia, Southern Europe, many islands of the Pacific Ocean, including Japan. There is evidence to show that before 1,000 years BC, the Americas, Mexico, the Yucatan, it is very important to note, when they were in power, they did not rule with an iron hand, because they knew the one God and ruled with his spirit all humans on earth to live together in harmony with nature was God's command. Again, this poem was written by me, Dr. Anthony O. Hobbs, and it's designed in poetry in order to perpetuate what I've just said about the importance of us today learning to live together, calling a spade a spade. I'm going to conclude from this with a little story. Young people, many of you don't know that a spade is used to unearth dirt and a shovel is used to unearth dirt. The older folks know that, like Ren and that group, they know about that. So when they say call a spade, they mean be true to what the situation is. A spade is used to break the soil when it's hard, to break it. The shovel is used to scoop or lift the dirt out of the hole. So they say, don't call a shovel a shovel. You won't be correct. Call a spade a spade. How much time do we have, Randy? We're going to stop for this is the second segment. The third segment is coming up in just a few minutes.
Calls me googly eyes.
You know you're beautiful, right? You know that?
Even you are beautiful. I got bullied for wearing glasses. Share if you're against bullying.
We put it out there, just took off. 3 million people have shared this post. Don't let bullies get you down. I stand with you. Our whole family's wearing glasses. I wear glasses and I'm proud.
I even have the army on my team.
All the kind comments brought my child joy. I don't feel thank you is enough.
That's
Hey, look, it's those guys.
What's up? What's happening today? Let's do those pearly whites, man. Yeah. The boys, check it. Stand up to my terrorists, don't compare us. Go.
Ooh, cute.
Are you good to drive?
I'm fine.
Hey girl, what's up? What's the name? What's good? What's up?
How many did you have?
I should be fine.
You should be.
Sir, go and step out of the vehicle for me.
Yes, sir. See ya, buddy. Today, Sean's got a hearing. We'll see how it goes. Good luck. So turns out, buzz driving and drunk driving, they're the same thing, and it costs around $10,000. So not worth it. Stoppable.
Those of you who have just joined us, I'm Dr. Anthony Hobbs, host and founder of this educational program called The School Without Walls. Earlier I've mentioned the purpose. The purpose is to educate and elevate my family, the African American community. And the reason being, the history causes us to be behind other ethnic groups, and we've got to run fast or we're going to catch up. If you're in a race, a marathon, it means running many miles. Is that right, Coach Al? You're running a marathon. You were not permitted to run in a marathon until after it's a 25-mile marathon. When it started, you were not permitted to run, but later on, people decided to let them run too, meaning the African American. 5 miles, they were 5 miles ahead of you. Common sense would tell you can't get in the race and run at the same pace that people ahead of you are. You got to run harder. And this is what I'm trying to get young people to do here in the educational arena. You got to be as my parents and my teachers taught me. You got to be the best that you can be. That average stuff won't work unless that's you. If you're average, you can't be but average. But don't run with the average people when you are above average. So I'm going to conclude that with this. I believe it was Shakespeare who said, "To thine own self be true, and that shall follow as the night follows the day. Therefore you find yourself false to no man." That goes right back to an old African proverb that simply tells you to know who you are. Know who you are, and try to run with people that compliment you rather than people that pull you down. Now back to what I was saying about Africa. In the beginning, the whole earth was one, according to science. In the beginning, the whole earth was one super land mass centered on what is now called Africa. Remember, that was not the name given by the Creator. That was given to them by Greeks. Africa, the name Africa was given to the the people of that area of the world by the Greeks long after those people had established civilization. The earliest people known to science that lived in what now we call Africa, remember the boundaries were set by the Europeans. Africa, the people that are in Africa today, the original people, were also in what is now Saudi Arabia. They were in what is now Palestine. They were in what is now India. And they was in what is now Iraq, Iran, and all those areas. They were there. Now, the continent as we now know them all broke off from Central Africa landmass many, many years ago. Now we got to stress, when we say Africa, we're talking about that area of the world that includes more than the Africa today. Because the original people of old Africa were called something else. They were called Hamites, biblically. Ham, Shem, and Japheth were the three brothers that populated the whole world after the flood, according to that Genesis story. But also they had a secular name called the Kemites. Kemet was before that was in Egypt. During the time of the building of the pyramids, they did not refer to themselves as Africans, they were Kemites. Now, we're getting ready to conclude, so let me briefly say, scholars continue to find archaeological evidence to support the out-of-Africa theory of human origin. Recently, geneticists have contributed to the body of evidence. They have collected samples of DNA from people all over the world, and after testing, they have concluded that, based on genetic variations, African genes have been around longer than any other human genes. Now, when I say African genes, I'm talking about black genes. Let us be clear on that. Although all people came out of Africa. In concluding the first segment of our February Black History, I have a poem I've written, another one called "We Are the Keepers of Our History." This poem, "We Are the Keepers of Our History," was written as a prelude to the month of February, which is the month set aside nationally to emphasize the need to study African American history. It is also to induce thinking and to give attention to the life and works of Dr. Martin Luther King, whose birthday is in January. This poem was written with the intent to show whose responsibility it is to record one's history. The essence of the poem lies in the fact that the pathway to self-realization is knowing one's history. As Americans, and especially African Americans, we are much too impoverished in this discipline. We are the keepers of our history, so if our history is to be recorded, this we must know. Write what you do as you go. It was I, he or she, who made the high score. My father, brother, or sister designed such a magnificent door. Keep clippings of news articles of that which happened before. Talk with your elders concerning their experiences and record that which is central to your history's core. Please understand that history is simply that which happened today, yesterday, and as time passes, will become that which happened years ago. Yes, we are the keepers of our history, the legacy we must ascertain. This fact is of the utmost importance. Thus, in our mind, it should always entertain. To expect others to willingly write your history is wishing in vain. To wait for others to do what we should do is sacrilegious. Yes, it is downright profane. On this note, I wish to emphasize the importance of us remembering the life and works of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. To study the study of his life will be more than giving us the work of a great man. When we seriously look at his life, it will elevate us to a higher plane. The position he took was directly going against the grain. At least once a year, all the world should pause for at least a moment to feel his agony and his pain. and pray for those who regret that his work was germane. We should concentrate on what he stood for, what was just and quite humane. Martin was not a racist campaign. His work and his life serves as a light to the entire human domain. It was he who ignited the spark to break the evil, unfair, unjust segregation chain. Yes, Dr. Martin Luther King was a great soul. His work and philosophy we must retain. However, let us not forget, we are the keepers of our history. This is the central thought and is most germane. I hope that this forum entertains you, but more importantly, I hope that the message is received by you. We are the keepers of our history. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching this program. And don't forget, we are shown daily on Channel 24, the University of Arkansas's TV channel, 6 a.m. and 4 p.m. Thank you, Mr. Kelley, for working with us. Randy Kelley is the manager of this TV station at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. Okay.